Hi everyone, and welcome to our final instructional module for Hispanic heritage in the Southwest. So throughout this semester, we've examined more than 500 years of history. We've explored how cultures met, how they clashed, how they adapted, and how they've changed over time. We've discussed exploration, colonization, religion, identity, resistance, and cultural expression. So this final module, it isn't about learning a brand new topic. Instead, it's about kind of stepping back and asking one important question, like how does the past continue to shape the present? And if there's one idea I hope you take away from this course, it's that history doesn't simply stay in the past, it continues to influence the communities we live in, the language we speak, and the traditions we celebrate, and even some of the debates that we have today. So, looking back, let's think about where we started. So, we began talking about Spain before 1492. And why? Because understanding Spain helps us understand why exploration happened in the first place. Religious motivations, competition between kingdoms, economic opportunity, and political ambition all influenced Spain's expansion into the Americas. And from there, we examined exploration and conquest. And one thing I hope you've realized that these events, they were never simple stories of heroes and villains. They involved cooperation, they involved conflict, negotiation, violence, adaptation, and also survival. History and just learning about culture is almost always more complicated than the stories that we've learned growing up. Next, we discussed evangelization and the mission system. Rather than viewing missions only as churches, we looked at them as religious, political, economic, and cultural institutions. Some indigenous communities adapted, some resisted. Many did both at different times. And that complexity is one of the reasons why we continue to study this period today. We also explored the borderlands. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is thinking borders have always existed exactly where they are today. Instead, borders were places where cultures mixed together. People traded, families intermarried, languages blended, communities constantly adapted. And the idea of cultural exchange led naturally into our discussion of like the mixed races that we see. And that's probably like that racial mixing because it's not just about races mixing, but it also included language and religion, food, traditions, music, architecture, and everyday life, a mixture of all those together. And even today, much of what we think of as a Southwestern culture really developed because those different communities influence one another over generations. And then later in the course, we shifted to identity. And some of the events that happened because of the identity shift that we had. So we talked about terms like Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Mexican American, Chicano, Chicana, Latinx. And one important lesson from that is that identities aren't fixed, they change over time as well. People define themselves in different ways depending on history, geography, family background, politics, and then just personal experiences. No single label tells someone's entire story. We also studied quite intensively the Chicana movement through that really easy book that you guys read. And I noticed that this movement wasn't simply about civil rights, it was also about history. And many activists believed that they couldn't change the future until they understood the past. That's why recovering those forgotten histories became so important. The movement also helped to change and challenge stereotypes and encourage people to take pride in their heritage while demanding equal treatment. We then talked a little bit about popular culture and religion. We looked at, cultural expression. We looked at music, art, literature, popular folk religion, and these topics remind us that culture isn't something found only in museums. It's very much alive. Every generation preserves certain traditions while adapting others, and that's exactly how cultures survive. So looking at Hispanic heritage today, it's woven throughout the Southwest. You see it in our cities, our architecture, our place names, our food, our music, our religious celebrations, our bilingual communities, and even in the words that people use every day. Sometimes people assume that history is disconnected from modern life, but if you've paid attention throughout the course, you've probably realized the opposite of that is true. The past is all around us. So as you begin preparing for the final exam, what I would like for you to do is don't focus on memorizing names and dates. I don't do that. Instead, I want you to think of like these big overarching questions. Why did this happen? How did this event change later history? How are all these topics connected? So, for example, how do the borderlands connect to that mixing of cultures? How does identity connect to the Chicano movement? How does the Chicano movement influence discussions today? And if you can explain some of these connections, you'll probably do really well on the exam. So, and also the exam covers the topics that you've already seen. It's the same questions that you've already seen. There's nothing new being introduced. It's just a review of everything we've done over the course of the last 7 weeks. So I'd like to leave you with this one final thought. Throughout this course, we've seen that history of the Southwest is not the story of one culture replacing another. Instead, it's the story of people meeting, adapting, resisting, preserving traditions, and creating new identities. And this process is still happening today. So it isn't finished. We're all a part of it. And I hope that this course has helped you better understand both history of the Southwest and the diverse communities that shape it and the culture that has been produced because of it. It's a very unique culture that we have. So I wish you the best of luck on the final exam.